Recently, I made a video where I gambled a bunch of soul cores. Now, going into that video, my initial assumption had been that all the soul cores might be evenly weighted, but I didn't know. And so I spent a bunch of money, I gambled a bunch of soul cores. I came away from that video unsure as to whether Azcapa was in fact rarer, or if I was just unlucky. So I decided to use a much larger sample size to definitively answer that question. And so I spent almost all the money that I had, around 330 divines, converted them all over to exalts, which, by the way, got me just shy of 40,000 at 39,400x, and I turned all of that into soul cores, about 4.6x per soul core. The price fluctuated a little bit. When I calculated it all out after writing down all the numbers, 4.635. And then I also spent 10 million gold, which was the hardest part of this project. You have to do quite a few maps to get 10 million gold, even with rarity. Putting all that in, I then spent several hours at the combination bench, combining my soul cores, and putting aside all the Azcapa, all the Sintequilotl, all the Zilotl, those three because they are particularly valuable, and all the Cholotl, Atmohua, and Zentipi, because you can't actually reforge those. If I could have, I certainly would have. The goal here was to see if Azcapa is in fact rare. Now, before I share the results, a quick reminder. If you like seeing weird things where I just click 8,500 of an item, this is probably not the channel for you because I don't think I have the patience to do this too many more times. Go check out Slippery Jim. But if you want to see what I'm doing, whether it's clicking a bunch of items, making currency, crafting, playing builds, or even playing other games, get subscribed. And if you found this entertaining so far, do be sure to leave a like while you're down there. But now, let's get into the results. And so here we have a really good visual representation of the answer to the question. Is Azcapa rarer than the other soul core types? Yes and no. Because I got 262 Zilotl soul cores. I got 255 Sinquadolotl soul cores. And I got 150 Azcapa. But the Cholotl, Atmohua, and Zentipi are actually pretty close at 119, 105, and 122. I feel like the numbers are such that I can say these probably all have the same rarity. With a spread of 105 to 122, that just feels like normal variance even with such a large sample size. I can also definitively say these two are more common, because over 8,500 soul cores, or like 3,000 plus, actually, because I was recombining some of them twice, it's probably just shy of 4,000 total recombination attempts. These are more common. This is more common than this, but keep in mind, the highest here was 122, and this was 150. That feels a lot closer, so I'd say it's probably slightly more common than these, but it is definitely more rare than these. I did not track all of the other soul cores, but I suspect all of the other soul cores have rarities more like this, with maybe a couple in here possibly being closer to Azcapa, but I don't really have any strong evidence for that. That's just a gut feeling, knowing how GGG tends to do things, where they probably did them in sets of 3 or something. Could be totally off of that, though, and if you have recorded all the numbers, I am curious. I'm probably not going to do this again. At the very least, I don't think I'm going to do it for science because it actually takes a lot of time to write down all the numbers. And so I'm curious about the numbers, not that curious. If you just wanted the answer of is Azcapa rarer? Yes. Is it the rarest? Still not too sure. Now, going into this, I really didn't set out to make a profit. That wasn't the goal anyway. The real goal was to spend a whole bunch of time, several hours, and a whole bunch of money, namely all of it that I had, to see if Azcapa was actually rarer than some of the others, roughly by how much, and if any soul cores had a similar rarity, which I feel pretty confident in. It's not quite a slippery gem sample size of 10,000, but it's pretty close, and if I combine it with some of the findings from my previous dataset, I do feel it's a very strong result. But since I have all of these soul cores, let's see what they're worth. First up, I have 150 Azcapa. So I have Exalted Orb, I want Azcapa, 252x each, which would be about 37,800x. Remember, for all of these, I spent 39,400. So I have basically paid for everything just with the soul core of Azcapa that I got back. Alternatively, if I use divines, it's 2.2, so 150 times 2.2, 330. Again, I spent about 340 divines, so getting 330 back, again, just from the single most valuable soul core, really, really good. Next up, Sintaquilotl. I probably butchered that. They are 10 to 1 divine, and I have 255. That's easy. 25.5 div. Alright, so I've made about 15 div. Alternatively, in Exalt, it looks like they're 12, so let's do the math here. Yes, I wrote a couple of these down beforehand because I checked just to get an idea to make some notes. That is 3,060. So, pretty good. Next up, last but not least, Xolotl. These are 31, and I really should have written down the Exalt price rather than the div price, because 262 times 31 is 8,122 Exalts, or, wait, no, I need to select divines here, 3.3 to a div, which is about 78.7 divines. Now let's add all that up. 37,800 plus 3060 plus 8122. The total is 48,982 Exalts minus the 39,400 originally spent, or a profit of plus 9,582x, if you're doing all the trades in X, which in this bulk, probably not the best idea. So instead, doing the divines, it is 330 div plus 25.5 plus 78.7, or 434 divines. Well, 434.2 minus the original 340, or 94 divines in profit. I would not say this took no time. It did take a few hours. I wasn't exactly paying attention to exactly how many hours. But I would say, in terms of divines an hour, that's pretty ridiculous. Although in terms of gold spent, now we get to do something cool, because we take the 10 million gold. Remember, most of that was from converting divines over to exalts. Divide that by 94.2. So I got one divine for every 106,000 gold. So you could say I sold my gold at a ratio of 106k per divine. And of course, the Xolotl and all the other attribute ones, they're technically worth something as well. So I guess might as well at least look, because that's like 2 more div. This feels so weird after the big numbers from before. 56. I'm just going to say it's like 6 more div, mostly because I'm lazy and these aren't worth very much anyway. But hey, another 6 div brings the profits to almost exactly an even 100. I'll take it. All right, so in my last video, I said several times, this is gambling. Don't do it unless you are willing to completely lose all the money that you put in. And to be honest with you, I kind of want to say the same thing here. Because yes, I did profit massively, but I had a massive sample size. So instead what I'm going to say is, if you have a huge amount of money, and you could buy 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 soul cores, it starts to get pretty deterministic. But if, let's just say you are buying 100, 200, or 500 soul cores, you are much more at the whims of RNG. You may get a profit, you may lose money. The other thing to keep in mind is there's a little bit of a ratio that you have to consider. I don't 100% know the exact ratios, but I can make some guesses based on my numbers. So I started with 8,500 soul cores, and I ended up with 150 Azcapa, which means I got 1 Azcapa for roughly every 57 soul cores that I started with. It's actually 56.666, but I am rounding here. So 1 in 57. I also ended up with 255 Cinquilotl and 262 Zalotl. I'm going to assume that these two have the same rarity and add them together for the sake of kind of stable data. So that's 517 other valuable soul cores, or roughly 1 in 16.44. What this means is you can check the price of soul cores, and you can check the price of the valuable stuff, but again, by averaging, and come up with a rough approximation of how much you're going to spend and how much you are expected, not guaranteed, to get back. What do I mean? Let's just say I buy 1,000 soul cores at 5x each. Now, for every 57 of those, I expect to get 1 Azcapa. So 1,000 divided by 57, I expect to get 17.5, and I will round down to 17. I also expect for every 16.44, so divided by 1,000 divided by 16.44, or 60.8, which I'll round down just for the sake of simplicity, 30 of each of the other two. You can then take the current price of each of those, so 252 times the Azcapa, that's 4,284x, 30 of each of the other two, and if you add their prices together, you get 31 plus 12, or 43, so 1,290x. That means you spent 5,000x, and you got back 4,284 and 1,290. You made a profit of 574 exalts. Pretty good. Just keep in mind, this is going to cost quite a bit of gold, so you are effectively turning gold into exalts. Also, this assumes average RNG. You could get lucky. You could get 20 Azcapa, in which case you'll profit a lot more. You could get 14 Azcapa, in which case you'll profit a lot less. So ultimately, it is still gambling, unless you do it in lots of like 3,000 or 4,000. Then, as long as you know the numbers and the ratios, there's a good chance you'll be able to profit. But my dataset is 8,500 soul cores. I don't think it's necessarily perfect, and so if you have a bigger dataset or more precise numbers, then do be sure to let me know down in the comments below, because I think that'd be really cool, and I'm probably not going to repeat this experiment again. Oh, and just as a fun/interesting fact, if you want to really maximize your profits, also check the trade site, because sometimes you get a different ratio buying or selling an item directly to other players. Will it be more annoying because you have to do single trades? Yes. Also, it might be vastly more profitable because it's more annoying. So if you're looking to actually do this to make money, or I guess to make more money, then go ahead and check that out. Also, if you want to see what I did before, I'll link to my first video up in the card and down below. Aside of that, I'm going to get going and go dump a whole bunch of soul cores on the market. So, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.